Welcome to our 11:10 session, Roots of Health, the intersection of regenerative, human food, and planetary health. I'm Farah Khan, a medical oncologist here at the University of Vermont Medical Center and a co-chair for this year's conference. I'm happy to present our panel moderator, Christina Vollbrecht. Christina is a chef educator on the culinary medicine team at UVM Medical Center. She's a Michelin-starred sous chef, a Vermont cheesemaker and farmer, and she has been an educator for over 15 years. She has an MA in sociology and an MS in nutrition and integrative health. As a reminder, we'll have a Q&A session after the panel today. Zoom attendees, please chat in your questions and a volunteer will read them aloud. For in-person attendees, please wait for the microphone to be brought to you before you ask your questions so that our Zoom colleagues can hear your questions as well. And now I'll turn it over to Christina.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming to our panel today. I am Christina. I'm a chef, I was a farmhand, I'm an educator, I'm a dietetic intern, but the kind of identity that I'm really bringing here today is that of a caretaker. So to get this panel started and to kind of set the tone for the conversation today, I want to share just a brief bit about my journey with food and cancer. And I think that our session following the one that we just had about environmental exposures and things like that was very well planned, so kudos to whoever put us after Dr. Engel. So everyone in this room in some form or another has been impacted by cancer. My father was exposed to an herbicide called Agent Orange during his time serving his country in Vietnam. And as a result, he was, we like to say, killed in action. It just took 40 years. I spent a good part of my 20s as a caretaker. The amount of information that you have to process when you're faced with a cancer diagnosis is overwhelming. There's an immediate sense of loss of control and sometimes guilt. And our fates are kind of left in the hands of trusted medical professionals while we spend our time focusing on hope. So as I sat beside my father through years of chemotherapy and surgery and radiation, I found I was able to express my love and support and contribute to his healing journey through food. Granted, I worked as a chef at the time, so food was already a language that I spoke, but it also became important to me because I saw how inadequately nutrition was covered by the hospital. My father developed severe mucositis as a side effect of his treatments. His mouth would blister. It became incredibly painful for him to eat. And he was not referred to a dietitian or to a therapist or anyone to address these issues. And as a result of that, he was malnourished, which also wasn't mentioned or brought up by any of his providers. So I found myself, as a 25-year-old, his daughter being the one at home trying to sneak Ensure into his ice cream or to cook scrambled eggs that were soft enough for him to palate. So food was an important part of our cancer journey for a variety of reasons. For the patient, it was something that was impacted by his treatment, but it also was a variable that needed attention during his treatment. For the caregiver, it became a way to concretely participate in the care process. It was a factor I could actually influence, and it connected me with a role and a purpose. So in the years since, and admittedly as a reaction to the fact that I lost my father due to the exposure to agrochemicals, my attention to food has expanded from cooking to food systems and food production, and their impact on the health of the environment, on our food, and of ourselves. So I am beyond proud today to have been part of putting together this panel, which touches on some of these important health connections that we're talking about today. So thank you very much for having us. And I'll introduce our panel of speakers here. We have Jacob Barker, who is an oncology pharmacist. We have Jennifer May, who's an oncology dietitian. We have Heather Darby, who's an agronomist, and we have Jessica Coleman, who is an oncology health and wellness coach. Today we're going to discuss the link between planetary and human health, and more importantly, how you can bring this information home to inform your daily decision making. With that, I'm going to pass the mic to Jacob. Thank you.
So, hi everyone, thanks for having me. I will start the talk off today by focusing on kind of how plants kind of matter to cancer treatment specifically. And that really came with the advent of some new treatments, including immunotherapy. While most people kind of understand chemotherapy is just a way to treat cancer by just killing cells in the body that grow quickly. And cancer, when it becomes malignant, is just nonstop cell growth, and why chemo works so well on it. Immunotherapy actually uses the immune system kind of to focus and attack the cancer. Sadly, cancer knows ways of blocking this and pushing on the brakes, stopping that function, and immunotherapy is just a way of snipping the brake line of the immune system and allowing the immune system now to re-engage with the cancer. So really, you want a nice, healthy immune system to be able to capitalize on these medications. Right now, there's 8 different medications that work in this kind of class. They're called checkpoint inhibitors. The bolded ones, pembrolizumab and nivolumab, are really our workhorses, but we also have some other ones. And really, what's kind of revolutionized is that they went from being approved in 2014, and in about 10 years, we have over 250 FDA approvals for these medications. If you don't have any context, that's a lot, and it's quite drastically changed how we treat cancer. And not only that, looking at the number of current clinical trials utilizing these drugs, there's over 5,000. And I just made a chart and filled in different diagnoses that they were looking at disease states, and I stopped when I filled it up. And it's just pretty much every type of cancer is being studied with these medications. And I expect many more, future FDA approvals. We already had 3 this summer with these medications, so it's going to be continuing to grow. But when you actually look at response rates, they're kind of scattered. They're not great. If you look at the overall response rates of solid tumors, you're talking, up to 1 in 5 patients getting a good response from these. You're looking at some of the more what we call immune hot, or tumors that respond really well to the immune system. You can get up into the 50s and 60% there. So we have a lot of room to grow. We're still, a lot of the research is now kind of focusing on how do we identify patients that are going to respond to these treatments, are there biomarkers, or there things that patients can do to actually help benefit them while they're on these medications. And some of that research led to the use of the human gut microbiome. So in our gut, we have a collection of bacteria, fungi, viruses that colonize it in a healthy manner. And there's estimates that there's a number of cells in our gut that equal to the number of cells in our body. And one estimate was around 50 trillion cells in our gut. And there's a lot of responsibilities. These bacteria are functions that they're helping in the body. One's fermentation of food, protections against pathogens, helps with vitamin production, and then most importantly, it helps actually stimulate the immune response. And I'm not going to go through all the different things on this slide, but the main one right in front of there is it actually educates the immune system. So the immune system will sneak in there and take a look at the bacteria in your gut, and then there's all these shapes that are called antigens on the outside of these bacteria cells, and it's going to train the immune system to target those cells. And so once it educates those immune cells, they're going to travel throughout your body. If they ever run into that shape, they're going to attack that cell. So if they ever run into that bacteria, they're supposed to kill that bacteria. And so when we look at people's microbiomes, we're really looking at diversity and how healthy that microbiome is. And so when we have a person that may be eating a lot of meat, potatoes, their microbiome is actually that diverse. And you only have, in this picture here, you only have 3 different bacteria that they're looking at. So it's not a real diversity there. And then you can see in the bottom, those are the immune cells that can target those. And it's really, again, kind of limited. When we get into patients that have a really well diverse and healthy microbiome, you can see there the immune system is now targeting against so many different things in the body, and it has a much better job at maybe identifying different pathogens in the body. So how that connects to cancer is actually this thing called antigen cross-reactivity. Antigen, just again, that shape on the outside of that cell. You can see in the bottom left Y there is supposed to target those little circles in the A picture, but it also can target D, because there's one little circle on the outside of that. That D represents cancer. So cancer is so highly mutated that it creates a lot of different antigens on the outside of it that now the immune system, even though it's designed to attack that bacteria, can actually now identify the cancer and start attacking it too. So when we kind of pair that up with immune therapy, again, we're utilizing the immune system, and now we have a much stronger immune system to be able to target a lot of different things and hopefully find something on the outside of your cancer that's going to then latch onto it and create a good response. So looking at factors that can impact the gut microbiome, there's a lot of different things. We're not really going to worry about how you were fed as an infant or the birthing process. We're really looking at, diet and the drugs. And changes in diet and actually drugs can change the microbiome within a really quick time period, around 3 to 4 days. It's a really quick turnaround. Your gut microbiome, fluctuates a lot. But what we did find is that patients that did have a strong, diverse, and healthy gut microbiome, we saw increases in response rates to immunotherapy, and we saw survival outcomes from that. And that comes really from what we've noticed with plant-based diet. So plants becoming such an important part of feeding our gut microbiome so that when we start utilizing these immunotherapy drugs, we're now going to hopefully have a much better response. Quick summary, again, immunotherapy kind of revolutionized our treatment pathways. Response rates aren't great, but we're now finding out the gut microbiome, and then plant-based diets are really going to help kind of boost that up. And I can now pass it on to Jen.
It does work. Okay, perfect. So I have a lot of pictures of food to hopefully get you hungry for lunch. So as Jacob discussed, I think we can safely say through research, a good diet is important to maintain a functional immune system. So by avoiding immunodeficiency due to malnutrition or micronutrient deficiencies. Eating enough nutrients as part of a varied diet is required for health and function of all cells, including those immune cells. And there are certain dietary patterns that may better prepare the body for those microbial attacks and excess inflammation. But it is important to also note it's unlikely that individual foods offer special protection. Each stage of the body's immune response relies on the presence of many micronutrients. So some examples of nutrients that have been identified as critical for growth and function of immune cells include, but also not limited to vitamins A, C, D, and E, iron, zinc, and protein, all of which are found in a variety of plant and animal foods. Okay, perfect. And that often then leads to the question, do taking vitamin supplements help? And it is true, a deficiency of single nutrients can alter the body's immune response, with animal studies finding deficiencies in the vitamins and minerals that I previously mentioned, plus selenium, copper, folic acid, and B6, potentially altering immune responses. These nutrients help the immune system in several ways, as I think Jake also discussed. It could be working as an antioxidant to protect healthy cells, supporting growth and activity of immune cells, and producing antibodies. And then studies have found that those who are poorly nourished are at greater risk of bacterial, viral, and other infections. So a powerful way, though, to strengthen our defense is by making sure our immune system, or our immune cells, get a good daily supply of vitamins and minerals from the foods we eat. Nutrients from foods do consistently demonstrate greater effect than that gained from taking supplements. And because there's an exception to every rule, one exception to this is vitamin D. We just don't get enough from food. I think am I missing some slides here? Here, I'll back up. You know what, I was supposed to, here, I'll say this. So the question, the why. So why when we eat whole foods? Why are the foods important? You're getting more than just one particular nutrient. You're enjoying this whole symphony of important vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, phytonutrients, fiber, water. They're all working together to enable your immune system to do its best work at keeping you healthy. And then there's the vitamin D. That's the exception. And then we also know that there are certain populations and situations in which one just can't always eat a variety of nutritious foods or who have increased nutrient needs. And then in these cases, a vitamin and mineral supplement may help to fill in some nutritional gaps. Otherwise, so eating a good quality diet as depicted by the Healthy Eating Plate can prevent most vitamin and mineral deficiencies. And really the focus should be making half of your plate fruits and vegetables, a quarter whole grains. These foods contain those valuable antioxidants and phytonutrients which your body uses to keep you healthy. And phytonutrients are just biologically active compounds. They're only found in plants. So you can only get them through whole grains, beans, nuts, fruits, and vegetables. I like to think of them as part of the plant's immune system, and when we eat them, we strengthen our immune system. And then the other fourth of your meal can be a lean protein, like chicken, fish, or plant-based protein, beans, nuts, or quinoa. So remember those nutrients that we identified as helping to support the immune system, all these foods are packed with them. And then another simplified way I like to help people think about how to set up meals or snacks is to focus on including a lean protein, a healthy fat, and a fiber-rich food at each eating time. And these are just some examples of that. So food first. And it's really important to choose a variety of minimally processed foods. So a good goal is to aim for one ingredient foods more often than not, and the more natural colors, the better. Diets that are limited in variety and lower in nutrients, such as consisting primarily of those ultra-processed foods and lacking in minimally processed, limited ingredient foods, can negatively affect a healthy immune system. And it's believed that this kind of diet can also promote disturbances in healthy intestinal microorganisms that live in our microbiome, so resulting in that chronic inflammation of the gut and that associated suppressed immunity. So to drive it home, just the punchline again is that high fiber, plant-rich diet with plenty of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, beans, seeds, and legumes does appear to support the growth and maintenance of those beneficial microorganisms, supporting the immune system, which in turn can help make you feel your best. You're next.
All right, well, hello. Just curious, are there any other agronomists out there today? No, didn't think so. I just feel like a fish out of water here, but what I've learned just for the little bit of time I've been with my panel members and also the presentation I heard before this is that maybe I should be a fish in the same water as you, and we are connected in so many ways that we know and don't know, and I think one of the reasons I decided that I would do this is because it seemed to sort of make sense. Yes, agriculture, soils, health, they should all be connected, right? Yeah, intuitively, when you stop and think about it, that's what we're all talking about, whether it's sort of the negative implications that we've heard about from food production or the positive attributes that can be gained from eating healthy foods. We're connected to each other. So when I was asked, is soil health related to human health? Yeah, of course it is. But is there research and data to back all that up? Actually, not really. Even though intuitively, right, just look at this picture. This is a dust bowl. Like clearly the degradation and the management of soil during that period of time had huge implications on the direct health of people, but also indirectly as well. So when I was asked to do this, I thought simple, but then I thought, but are those connections really there? Interestingly, well, a week before we had this meeting, this document came out from the National Academies of Science. It came out at the end of 2024, and I thought, oh, okay, we're not the only ones thinking about this. And it is a assessment on exploring the linkages between soil health and human health. And I thought, wow, okay, we're all thinking about the same thing. And you know, kind of at the end of the day, if you go and get this document and read it, and you should, it kind of says, yes, intuitively, these things are linked, but we don't have a lot of direct linkages. And that is an area of research that we need to expand on. What I learned from this document was this concept of One Health. Does everybody else know this? Like, have you ever heard of this? I'm sure everybody has heard of this, but it's not my area, although it should be, which is that, well, we're all interconnected, right? The health of people, the health of animals, and the health of our planet, which is, you know, a directive we have here at the university, are all really closely linked and interdependent on each other. And this document is one that kind of delves into that, but really focused on soil. So this was really of interest to me. I had never, I mean, I know this, but I hadn't really thought it through. Now, of course, when we think about soils and human health, we just heard about if people eat plants, okay, and other proteins, you know, animals that eat plants, that's where we get our nutrition. That's where we get these nutrients that keep us healthy, but also create this interesting microbiome that apparently is really important. And so 78% of the calories that we eat actually come from the soil. Okay, well, there's a pretty good linkage. And the other 20% indirectly, right? So the soil is critical to human health, just from that perspective. Now, on the opposite side, which we heard, the soil can also harbor a lot of contaminants. And we also know that, and we're hearing that emerge more and more and more, especially around the conversations of microplastics and PFAS. So when we think about food production and food security, again, that's where we're most connected to soils and plants. In order to have a secure food source, we have to have soil to grow that food. And we have to be able to grow ample amounts. So for every acre that we're producing food off from, we need to produce as many nutrients from that acre as possible to feed as many people as possible. And the soils obviously play a huge role in that. Both the genetic background of the soils, which sounds kind of odd saying to all of you folks, but that's how I look at it, and how the soil is managed really plays a significant role in how much we get and also the quality of what we get. From just the food perspective, not even thinking about the indirect impacts, right? What we call ecosystem services that the soils offer all of us, okay? So again, the ability for the soil to produce food and high quality food is largely dependent on the kind of genetic makeup of the soils. Are they well drained? Is it a clay? Is it a sand? Is it rocky? Is it bony? And the environment around it. Are you in Florida? Are you in Vermont? You could see how those different climatic conditions and how the soils were produced could really impact what we can grow and how much we can grow. Now, beyond that is management, okay? So taking those soils and how they're managed can reduce the quality and productivity of what we get from those soils, or how we manage them can optimize that. And really my job in this state and beyond is to help farmers implement those practices and management with what they have genetically, basically, so that we're producing the healthiest soils that can then output the most quantity and quality per acre from a food perspective, but also from an environmental or ecosystem service perspective. And this is huge, and it's very complicated. So we call this soil health. I'm Dr. Soil. That's me. I treat the soil. Maybe similar to some of you and what you do with people. You try to take a holistic approach, right? You try to manage problems before they appear. And that's what we do too. So soil health is the ability of the soil to sustain the productivity and diversity and environmental services of the terrestrial ecosystem. That's big. Soil has huge responsibility. And we, as people, have the responsibility, right, to help the soil do everything that it can to reach its maximum potential. Because for us, honestly, it's a matter of life and death, right? Soil is why we live here, right? Why we can. Soil is life. So all of the services it creates from us, from cleaning water to producing food, to providing resiliency to climate, as we can see here, two different, very different soils after 7 inches of rain. I think you, even though you're doctors of something else, you know which one's healthy and which one's not, I hope. So healthy soils are critical to the function of everything, and especially critical to our health and productivity. I'm probably running out of time already. So what is soil health again? It's a systems approach to managing soil, where we're looking at the physical, the biological, and the chemical properties of the soil. In the past, honestly, mostly we looked at the chemical properties. Give the soils the nutrients that the plants need so that then the plants can grow and be productive. But now what we realize is we have to build the biology, the microbiome of the soil, to basically get everything to move and turn and be healthy. And in order to have a diverse microbiome, just like we heard before, you have to feed the soil different things. You have to have different plants. You have to have different amendments to the soil. And you also have to create a home that they want to live in, which is the physical properties of the soil. So when we're talking about soil biological diversity, again, it's not unlike exactly what we just heard about. It's complex, but not that hard, really. If you build it, they will come. That's from a movie, maybe some of you remember, but an ag movie. But if you build it, they will come. And it's the same, that's what I tell the farmers I work with. If you build organic matter and you create plant diversity, the microbes will come and they'll be diverse and they'll provide lots of function that we need, like nutrient cycling and disease prevention, even in plants. They're going to help us reduce pesticides, which is a huge issue. So this figure came from the booklet that I was just telling you about, trying to show the linkages between soils, plants, animals, and humans, and how their microbiomes are connected. But still, much of this is unknown, but intuitively, we know that this is real. So I think the call for more research and better understanding this for the health of all of us, as well as the planet, is kind of our next step. So for us, in agriculture, this is what I'm working with our farmers on. This is our sort of recipe for building the health of the soil, which you don't clearly need to know much about, but you need to know that it's important to us here in Vermont, and it's important to the farmers that I work with, because they know it protects them from climate fluctuations. It helps them have more yield. It helps their families be healthier. It helps them be more economically viable. So in the end, what I learned from this document is, this was my favorite quote, soil's not just a widget in the production system. It's really at the foundation of this One Health concept in all of our health. So is it important? Yes. And I guess I'll end with that. That might have been more than 5 minutes. So I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you.
So, by now, we've explored the question of why food choice matters, with answers tied to soil health and gut health. I now invite you to consider another root of human health, and that is lifestyle and behavior. The question being, once we have the information, how do we empower ourselves to make positive behavior change? Change is hard. I think everyone in this room can relate to that statement in one way or another. It's not just about knowing the science or learning the facts. We need to have a reason for change, a motivation for change. To put it another way, it needs to feel personal. I believe an integrative health approach allows us to bridge the gap between receiving information about healthy habits and acting on that information, because it puts you, the patient, the person, at the center. Integrative health is holistic. It is person-centric, not disease-centric. It involves a coordinated care team. It employs conventional, complementary therapies, and lifestyle medicine. It is a whole-person approach to health. This concept is illustrated by the Wheel of Health, a tool that gives us the opportunity to consider various parts of our lives, the many conditions that we as humans need to thrive. It includes things like movement, nutrition, environment, relationships, personal development, spirituality, sleep and rest, work-life balance, these many different aspects of our lives. And when we consider this entire picture, we begin to think about health a little bit differently. We begin to expand and deepen the conversation around health. Using integrative health tools and techniques like the Wheel of Health, motivational interviewing, and active listening, we can provide patients with a springboard for self-discovery. Patients can begin to explore questions like, what are my areas of strength? What can I draw from? What are areas that might need a little bit more focus or a little bit more attention? And how are all these different areas of my life connected? These tools provide space for self-reflection and put the patient at the center of their story. They uncover a person's motivation and priorities. They empower individuals to take responsibility for their own health and give them the opportunity to think about what brings me joy and happiness in my life, what restores my sense of joy and happiness, what gives me meaning, where am I now in terms of all these different areas of my life, and where do I want to be in the future? And ultimately, how do I get there? Well, as a health coach working with a patient, we get there by listening and we get there by planning and taking it one step at a time. First, we need to understand what a person's vision is, their vision for optimal health. This is where you want to go. Next, we need to identify unique health goals. These are goals that make sense to you and fit into your life. Then, together, we create smart action steps. These are not overwhelming or abstract goals. They're tangible. They are doable. They are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. To build on this roadmap analogy, we can also think about AAA for patients. Activation, meaning that patients feel ready, able, and confident about making a change. Access, meaning patients have access to resources and support. Accountability, meaning patients have an accountability or ideally accountability partners. We also need to remember that we need patience. Change doesn't happen at once, and healthy habits do not form overnight, but little steps over time do add up. So, what to remember about behavior change? First, to create lasting change, we must broaden the conversation around health. Next, we need to make it personal. Change is self-driven, and at the end of the day, you know yourself best. Small shifts in behavior do add up, and it's important to be specific. And also, you don't need to do it alone. You can identify your support team and your care team, whether that's in the office or at home, working with a coach, different types of therapists. Care teams could take many different forms, and it needs to be multidimensional. And perhaps most importantly, it's necessary to tap into the joy to grow habits that have strong roots and will flourish. So I want to leave you with a quote that connects joy and behavior. Joy, in my sense, has indeed one characteristic, that anyone who has experienced it will want it again. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the panelists for that lovely and hopefully enlightening conversation. We do have time for some Q&A, and I'd actually like to kind of get the ball rolling by, let me see here. When faced with this is super big picture stuff, right? We're talking from soil health to farming practices to changing your diet to as an individual, that can be a lot, right? It's like that can be overwhelming. So as just to spur your thoughts on this process, to make this personal, I'm gonna ask the whole room, and we don't have to answer this, but just to get the thoughts rolling. So if there's one change based on today's conversation that you could make in your life today, what would that be? And what resources do you know are available that would help you make that change? And that is just the food for thought for this Q&A. But we welcome conversation.
We have a question from Zoom where somebody asked whether you felt that probiotics were good or bad for the immune system and immunotherapy response.
I can answer that, yeah. Some data has shown that probiotics actually reduce diversity in your gut microbiome. And so there's billions of them in these pills, but they're all the same 1 to 10 strains. And so they overtake your gut microbiome and thus reduce your usual response to immunotherapy. So we usually recommend against them while getting immunotherapy.
Hi, I want to ask you about your thoughts about turkey tail, because I'm a big forager for mushrooms, but I also use a lot of the stuff in my coffee every day. And we have an anesthesiologist that we work with who believes in turkey tail. And in Europe, as soon as someone gets diagnosed with cancer, they start them on it. And then I had a patient the other day whose family member had bone cancer, and they started on it, and they didn't even go through chemo, radiation, and no surgery, and eradicated. So I want to know your opinion on that.
I mean, as long as it doesn't interact with the meds that the physician is going to be prescribing for you, I think we're usually in support of trialing any herbal supplements like that. So, yeah, I think that's just the simplest answer to that question.
First of all, thank you all. That was wonderful. I could listen to each of you for an hour. But my question is for you, Heather. First of all, you skipped over a slide on microplastics, which maybe you can elaborate more on now. But my question is, what do you think about vegetables grown hydroponically, which I believe are more water-based, and do we get the nutrients from them versus from the soil?
Yes, so plants don't necessarily, plants take up very specific forms of the nutrients that they absorb. So as long as those nutrients are available in that form, they will take them up, which is why,
hydroponic vegetables or whatever kind of food you're buying can have all the essential nutrients in them, right? So plants don't differentiate between whether it's coming from a microbe or out of a plastic jug. What is different are some of the various compounds in the plants that would be changed because of their interaction with microbes. So microbes can turn plants' defense mechanisms on and off, which will create different compounds in the plant, some of those that were mentioned. And so those are probably the primary pieces that are less understood, but would be driven by actual soil and microbial associations. And also, some of the beneficial microbes that would be on the phyllosphere of the plant.
Okay, I'll keep it short.
We have kind of some follow-up questions from Zoom. One person was curious as to your thoughts about using probiotics outside of a cancer treatment context, so in terms of general health. And then another person was curious about, I'm not sure if any of you know, but about turkey tail, which a participant had mentioned.
Turkey tail.
So the first one, the probiotics, outside of, there's a great site, I don't know if I can remember. It's IS, do you know what I'm talking about? ISAPP maybe? There's a whole group that specifically studies probiotics and their specific uses, and I know there's a lot more research that needs to be done. And I think, if you go to their website and look at really, once again, this is talking about in general health, the correlations that we're seeing with probiotics and benefits, it's fairly limited. I think there's this big gray area. So I always, from my perspective, I do food first. And so I guess, once again, I think probiotics, are we talking pill form? Are we talking food form? I would always refocus on the food first. And then try to find ways to incorporate probiotics from food. Live active cultures, yogurt, kefir tends to be the easiest. And it's tough too. Marketing's tough. A lot of things are labeled probiotic or have probiotics, but that's a whole other probably presentation in itself. But you have to just be careful because how foods are processed and if they're cooked, and then it destroys the probiotics. But I guess in regards to, I know there's been now 2 questions about probiotics. I always flip it and say, well, let's focus on prebiotics, which are the fertilizer, the food for the probiotics that are in our gut, and how do we nourish what's there. And prebiotics coming from plant-based foods. And then the turkey tail mushroom, I wasn't sure what the question was.
Someone was curious as to what the relation of it to the discussion around immunotherapy and immune response was.
I don't think there is a connection. I think that was just a question from the audience. So it doesn't have any relation directly to that.
Dr. May et al. Supplementary fish oils, in my case, omega-3 ethyl esters, clinical indications, possible benefits, possible side effects.
Not a doctor, but thank you.
You're a nutritionist and a dietitian.
Is it good? Okay, perfect. No, I'll take it. That's fine. So fish oil, yeah, it's the same thing, clinical implications. I think it's tough. It's the same thing as far as I know that presentation, it was really, we had 5 minutes to kind of present maybe a little bit general information. And obviously, once again, as a dietitian, I'm always going to say food first because of the synergy within food that it provides for somebody. But I also think, too, fish oil is maybe one of those ones like vitamin D where not everybody's eating or has access to good sources of fish oil, omega-3s. And so in that case, that could definitely be a supplement that we would recommend. In regards to the immune connection, I know there is some research, some studies out there in regards to just more so inflammation with omega-3s, heart health. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but as far as for, pros and cons of omega-3s, it's not individual basis as far as for if I would recommend it to somebody, but I wouldn't discredit it, if that helps.
And they come from fresh vegetables.
Yeah.
My question relates to the whole issue of processed food. So for those of us who really embrace the work and research of supporting our biodome and eat plant-based, do you have some tips for navigating how hard it is to get to have a diet that doesn't include a lot of processed food? So I was just reading that, don't eat any kind of bread that comes in a plastic bag. In other words, no loaf. Finding bread that actually is close to not being processed. Beans, anything that's in a can, be it plant-based or otherwise, or in a plastic bag, has been processed. So any tips on how to deal with that?
I always tell people too, I think we have to you have to live your life. Simplicity, I always talk to people too about simplicity. That's a tall order to say, make all of your food from scratch and you have to eat one ingredient foods. It's not possible. Maybe it's possible, but it's not practical necessarily. And so we really work on it, and maybe Jess, you can jump in too, as far as it's not all or nothing. It's not all or nothing. It's really just focusing on what we can do and making swaps for somebody. In all honesty, when we talk about processed food, all foods are processed in some way. An apple, if it has wax on it, that's processed, right? So I think what we're trying to think about when we say there's processed food and there's ultra processed food, and I think we try to make the best decisions we can with what we have. If you go to a yogurt aisle, there's 1,000 different yogurts, and so we make choices within choices to say, okay, I don't want to call out a specific brand, but I'm not going to pick the one that's like fluorescent pink over the one that's,
Looks like milk.
that looks like milk. That's right. So I think, once again, it's not saying that you have to do everything from scratch. And same thing with the bread. It's stressful. And honestly, I'll end with this too. I think sometimes we try to be so perfect with our diets, or try to do these, completely maybe unprocessed diets. It's stressful. It's stressful. It can be stressful, right, to try to perfect your diet. And honestly, that stress is worse than probably anything that you could choose to eat. So I think we pick and choose our battles, but trying to decrease the stress around eating is also really important. And once again, it's a case-by-case basis, and that's where a dietitian, health coach would work with you to say, let's look at the big picture. Like, what are you doing 80, 90% of the time? And what are some easy swaps that we could make for you? But I could go off and continue on that conversation as well, but it's same thing. If somebody was having a bowel obstruction, couldn't eat had to have a soft diet, we're gonna work with you to adapt that high fiber diet so you can still eat plant-based foods.
Yeah, and in addition to everything that Jen just said that I would echo, sometimes it provides you with opportunities where, instead of thinking about everything that you need to take off your plate and you need to stop eating and you need to avoid, you start to think more about, what should I be including on my plate? What can I add to my plate that's really going to do a lot for me and is going to help me feel good? And over time, that starts taking up more and more space. And so it's less about eliminating and more about adding those really nutritious, nourishing sources of food. And to also just keep in mind that idea of joy, enjoying your food with others. Meal prep can be a beautiful way that serves to fill your plate in a lot of other ways. So just to keep that be part of that picture.
And there's hundreds of farmers markets, CSAs, and people around you that are producing healthy, nutritious, unprocessed food. Getting a CSA share with a basket of food that then you have to investigate, learn about, and prepare every single week forces people to change the way they eat. They paid for it, they pick it up. I have a CSA on my farm, and that's what I hear from the people that are in it, is that they don't know what half the stuff is, but part of the fun is learning about it, and it forces them to eat fresh, local, nutritious, unprocessed every week.
And if you need recipes, you can go to our culinary medicine website on the hospital website, and we have a database of recipes for you there. I think that's time, so thank you so much for your attention and your questions.
Thanks to our panel, great presentations and excellent discussion. It's now lunchtime. We have the lunch buffet out in the fireplace lounge. For our Zoom attendees, please be sure to log back in at 12:45 for our keynote speech. And for everyone else, have a wonderful lunch, and we'll see you back in this ballroom at 12:45 for the keynote. Thank you.